it's really nice to include people virtually as well. And then they can see him what's going on. So first I wanted to start with just a couple of resources that exist already that have been developed at Cornell for learning all of the pests of tree fruit. I love this guide about apple IPM for beginners, and there's a similar one for stone fruit IPM for beginners. And these are great because they start with a calendar that is based on phenology, just the way I was just talking about inside. So again, it says a little bit about like the damage that they can cause, and then the biology of the insect when they're active, and then when you should be managing and how you should be managing. Um, a lot of them have these nice silhouettes of like how big the insect is because a lot of them have really distinct patterns or distinct sizes or shapes, and so those can be really good reference. So there's a whole lot of fact sheets. I won't go through many of them right now. Um, And then I just want to like go up the ladder of like all the different resources we have. My favorite, because I'm a nerd, is this one. This is the Tree Fruit Field Guide, and this is like a real in-depth of like every pest that I could think of. So if you really just want to spend time getting to know insects, diseases, and other physiological disorders, this is a great book to know. And it was compiled by a bunch of university researchers all over North America for tree fruit. And then there are similar guides that have been developed by different people. Some of them, again, are available online, and some of them are not. Some of them had like limited number of copies, or certain bookstores will still print them. So it kind of depends from guide to guide. But these are like berry guides, ones for low bush blueberries and ones for all different kinds of berries. And so these are similar. They give lots of great pictures, overview of biology, and then some of the symptoms. So like Laura was just talking about raspberries and how viruses can cause small or not uh, clusters that break apart easily. All of those things can be caused by viruses. They can be caused by other things too. So it's important to, like I said, be diagnosing correctly as well. Um, this one is a dichotomous key. So I don't know one fork or the other. And so you can use that, look at your symptoms and get close to what your probably diagnosis is. So those are a few. I also printed a bunch of guides, and this is kind of just a quick summary, like one paragraph about the most common pests that I see. So if you're interested in one of these, feel free to take one. I actually did this with the intention of giving it to farm workers, and we made it in both Spanish and English because often the people that are working on the farm pruning and cutting suckers and things are the people that are in the orchard every day that know the trees the best. They're going to be the first line of defense. So help yourself one of those. And then I thought I would just go through a couple of the main apple pests and what we do for them. So maybe I'll start with scab because I talked about that already. And so apple scab, another fun teaching resource. Uh, if you want online guides, these QR codes will take you directly to the website with the PDF. So that I just showed you for the uh, but it's a series of weather stations all across the Northeast, not just in New York, where people invest in a weather station on their farm. And then there are a whole bunch of different sensors. And so the sensors are saying leaf wetness and temperature, relative humidity, things like that. And that is fed into a system, a model that is predicting when this infection event is happening. So that's a pretty complex level of thinking. But it gives you an idea of the precision at which we can understand the pests and then not apply a fungicide until it's really needed. So I wanted to pass around some of the apple scab so you can see the lesions up close and personal. Has anybody seen apple scab before? Yeah, okay. So we know where. What's interesting to me is like I don't see this in commercial apple orchards because they manage it so well. But right adjacent to commercial orchards, there will be abandoned blocks. And within 1 year, it just takes over the entire orchard and it can completely defoliate the trees. And once there are no more leaves on the trees, there's no more leaves to do photosynthesis. And so it's important to manage to stay on top of every year. Okay, so the fruits, you can see they have these black lesions, but what forms first are the leaves, the lesions on the leaves. And so they can be really small and just be like a couple of lesions, like this leaf. There's only one that I can see. I don't know. It's like kind of, here, you can pass that around. There's maybe one or two on this leaf too. So there is another one or two. And then it can get really severe really quickly into what these are a little bit bigger. They're a little bit more obvious. Brown, they get scabby looking. And then they can cover the entire leaf. We call this sheet scab. So it just kind of takes off. And so if you manage the first generation early in the spring, you're golden. You don't have any more inoculum left over. But if you don't manage well, then you have all this new inoculum that's going to cause new infection. So that's where we try to encourage people to do something proactively earlier in the spring, if possible.
I know you said earlier to like address it when the leaves are like tender young leaves, but like at what stage? Like
Yeah.
when the leaf tips are just emerging?
Yeah, so that's a great question. As soon as there's green tissue, it is susceptible. Yep. So what we recommend for home gardens is to have some kind of protectant on at dormant. So if you can put like just something you can pick up at the home garden store, like a copper or a sulfur, that's a general antimicrobial. And if you can apply it at late dormant, when the buds start to puff up a little bit, that will remove a lot of inoculum that is on your tree and prevent early infections.
So
then
is that it's absorbed by the tissue or does it wash
no,
off? I mean,
yep,
how does that work?
yep, perfect. That's just a perfect segue to what I was going to say next. Is if you're going to continue to protect your leaf tissue early in the spring, we recommend that you apply another fungicide every 10 to 14 days or before a rain event or after 2 inches of rain, because we assume washed off, the new leaves are not going to be protected. And so it's really important to keep protecting the new leaves that are emerging. Yeah. Do you guys want to see some scabby fruit? I could pass this around. But you can avoid all of that by just planting resistant cultivars. All you don't have to do any of that. I mean, if you just plant something like Crimson Topaz or Crimson Crisp, these are scab resistant varieties, and I don't see any scab on those varieties out in orchards.
People don't do that because nobody's ever heard of that and everybody
They
wants
can't
to,
sell them. Yeah, so commercial people don't sell varieties that consumers don't recognize. Yeah. So you have to grow Honeycrisp, Gala, and Fuji. That is it.
Crab apples get this?
Yeah, crab apples can get this too. So apples and other Malus species are susceptible.
So if you had a crab apple on your property and you had a few other apple trees that you want to eat,
you should be, yeah, so that's a good question. The question for the Zoom people is if you have crab apples, are they susceptible? And the answer is yes. So you need to be managing on those trees as well, especially if you have like dessert apples you want to eat from nearby. Yeah, unfortunately, sorry. And that goes for most of the diseases and insects we're talking about. Most of them have many hosts. They're often pretty specific, like there's a few host plants for because of evolution and insects and diseases tend to evolve very closely together with their host plant. They're often very specialized. So they only have a few hosts, but there are often a few host species that are growing wild or natively. So it's hard to manage that way. Yeah. Okay, let's show you another disease, I guess. Okay, this one is near and dear to my heart because this is what I did my graduate work on. This is getting a little old, but it's still okay. So, and it's probably better that it's old. This is fire blight, a couple of examples of fire blight. And so this is different. This is a bacterial pathogen. So the one we talked about in many of the diseases are fungal. So opening up your canopy, having quick drying time can reduce fungal pressure. This is a bacterial pathogen. And bacteria enter the plant differently. They can't puncture intact cell walls. So they have to enter through natural opening, or if there's wind whipping or hail, that causes damage to the foliage. The flowers have natural openings in the nectaries. So the bacteria grows on the flower and then it gets washed in during the infection event. And so that's what's happened here. You can kind of see these withered little flowers, fruitlets. See those? And so that's what happened is the bacteria grew really specifically on the stigmatic surface of the flower. It colonizes this really specific niche when it's hot, when it's like 70 or 80 degrees. And then it gets washed by a rain event or heavy dew into the flower, and then it infects the tissue nearby. So that shoot. This is a little bit bent, but you can see it's traveled back into the plant via the vascular tissue. And then once it gets to the older wood, it often gets like sort of walled off. It's harder for that bacteria to get into the rest of the plant. So it will sometimes stop. It sometimes can get all the way back into the plant and down into the rootstock and just kill the tree outright. So commercial growers apply antibiotics, just the way that if you get a bacterial infection, you take an antibiotic. And so what we do is we apply antibiotics in many commercial settings during bloom to protect the flowers. There are other things that we're doing trials on. And so that includes biologicals, so other things that will grow and colonize the same niche. They're not as effective. Told you this area where it gets a little thicker, the cell walls are thicker and preventing the bacteria from getting into the plant. We can apply plant hormones, we call them plant growth regulators, that induce more thickening of the cell walls. So shorter shoots and thicker cell walls. And so they're natural hormones that the plant produces. And we're sort of taking advantage of that and like making that happen on the tree to help it be more resistant. In a homeowner setting, I know you probably don't want to be applying streptomycin. You can't often apply antibiotics. So the thing to do is to make sure that you don't get it in your orchard. And so you want to get clean plant material from a certified nursery. And if you do see it, just prune it out as quickly as you can, and making sure to prune way back beyond where the infection is, because like I told you, it travels in the vascular system and can get into the rest of the tree quickly. So pruning into a couple years old wood is really the best. Like back where I pruned it here, that's probably a safe place to do it.
So if you see, like, so no matter when you detect it, it's the right time to trim it back, or are you then opening up a new wound that then it could enter?
That's a great question. The question is about what time you should prune it. Is it always the right time that you see the infections? Mostly, yes, prune it out soon. But don't prune when it's very hot and wet, because remember that's when the bacteria likes to grow and you'll have high sources of inoculum. So pick a dry day and then prune it all out as soon as possible. I was going to share a little bit with you about insects too. So a big difference between insects and diseases, 5 minutes. Okay, we'll try and stay on time. A big difference between insects and diseases is that disease talking all about like predicting when they're and knowing an infection prophylactically. And that's different than what we talk about in IPM frequently, is waiting for this threshold to develop and then taking action once it gets above a certain threshold. Infection already happened, and you often can't do a lot. So for insects, we usually can do. So we have all these fun traps where we monitor for the insect. We assert our biosets that we. I'm just setting up those we have. I don't know that you'd always be doing this in a home setting, but we're doing it at work, say, and then be managing according to like what the region. You can go on their website, or if you email me, I can get you in touch with Mike or Dan. Yeah. Okay, so these work by you hang this in the tree at a certain time of year, and then you put a pheromone inside, like I described inside before this morning. And then we see when the moths are flying. This is just a trap on its own, but this one has sort of a card that we stick in and we pull out. Hold on, dear hat. And so I wanted to just show you a couple of cards that I collected, so you can see kind of what that looks like and what we're thinking about when we're saying to manage pests. And so really what you would be doing in your orchard is like looking at your fruit at the end of the season and saying, oh, I have worms in my fruit, and then cutting them open and seeing what's inside. And then you know, like, oh, I have codling moth. I should be doing something to prevent them. And you could be putting an insecticide on, or there like mating disruption, which does require sort of a bigger area. But we're working on doing it on a smaller area, which is having the pheromones present throughout the orchard and confusing the moths so they can't mate. It's not really a backyard kind of application yet, but it gives you an idea that we're working on other IPM applications. So I was talking about codling moths, and these guys are kind of cute. They have a little gold tip on their wings. And so they're pretty easy to identify. They have kind of, you don't touch it, but if you hold on to the edge or like that, you might be able to pass it around. And so the gold tips on the wings is kind of what we look for when we're looking for codling moth. And then this one is oblique banded leaf roller. So this is a little bit later in the season. And so these are brown moths. They don't feed on the inside of the fruit. Codling moths go straight for the seeds. So if you have a worm in your fruit that's going straight for the seeds and eating the seeds, that high nitrogen source, protein source, that's probably codling moth. If you have a worm feeding on the outside of your fruit, that's most likely oblique banded leaf roller or a similar leaf roller. And so these guys are brown. They're kind of wide and fat, and they have sort of some squiggly diagonal lines for oblique bands on their wings. So again, kind of sticky, be careful. Let's see, what else can I show you with the last couple minutes? I'll show you this one because it's one of my favorite diseases. Oh, come on. Well, maybe I'll do it after I show you. I don't know. So this is not enough rocks. I'll get some more rocks before next time. So this is a rust disease, and I wanted to tell you about this because it's an interesting biology. Has anyone seen rust before? Yeah. So these are really cool because they're bright orange, right? They're so easy to see, and they infect the top of the leaf. It's a fungal spore that gets on there, and then they send out usually new spores on the bottom of the leaf that go infect something else. Thank you. And so these guys have two obligate hosts, which means like in one season they will be on apple, and then the next season they have to be on cedar or another similar host. So here, yeah, usually within a mile. It's a pretty big radius they go. So one year it'll be on apple, and then the next year the spores move to cedar. And so these are the galls that they form on the cedar. Oh yeah, you got some good pictures. Uh-huh. Yeah, and I put them in a bag. Whoops, there goes another bag. Sorry. Yeah, I put them in a bag and they sit under my big rock back there. And just by putting it in a bag and getting humid and wet, it started producing those bright orange spores again. There's also some mold on that. And one more rock. So I think just by being in that by being in that wet, humid bag was enough to make them create spores again. So that tells you the importance of fast drying time, keeping your canopy open, pruning well, and removing other host species. So similarly to this, where you could remove all your cedars and you'd never have a problem within a half a mile, there has been research done on codling moth where they removed all of the host species within, I think, a quarter of a mile or a half a mile, and effectively eliminated codling moth pressure in the orchard, which is pretty cool. Codling moth, another one is plum curculio and apple maggot, all sort of migrate into orchards from the outside, and by eliminating alternate hosts, you can reduce your pest pressure.
So, Anna, assuming that, your neighbors have a cedar that they don't want to get rid of, and you have,
I don't know what to tell you.
Crab apples or whatever. When you first start to see the rust form, is that too late at this point? Or, I mean, particularly, I assume there's absolutely nothing organic to.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the question is, by the time you see the fungal infection, is it too late? And mostly yes. Like you want to protect the leaves before the fungal spores get on them and infect them. Fortunately, rust is not going to be deadly usually in any case. And what if your neighbor has a cedar? Is that so? I think, or your other question was sorry.
Spray anything organic.
Yeah. So this is one more book I wasn't necessarily going to show you. This is the big book of pesticides. So when you're a commercial grower and you want to know specifically at bloom or specifically at petal fall, we have listed all of the different pesticides at each of those timings for each fruit crop, cherries, apples, plums, pears, and others. So that's why this list is so big, is because we're doing so many timings and so many pests. There are a few organic listed products. And so like coppers and sulfurs are effective against most fungal pathogens. And those can be applied at dormant, like I told you, to sort of reduce the inoculum that's going to happen throughout the early part of your season. And then there are some others too, and they're listed in this book, and I could follow up with you on that. Yeah.
Just because I would imagine that as a master gardener, a lot of people are going to be asking you, even if they're not growing apples,
yeah,
there's all kinds of things in that same family that they have some ornamentals that are.
Yeah. Yeah. So the last thing that I really wanted to mention to everyone here is in the folder that you're going to get, there are a couple of resources with, including this one, the IPM for Beginners gives you a couple of organic and low input options that you could start with. There's a nursery that I love, Schlabach, who's in Western New York. Do you guys know them? They hand out this one page of like how to manage an orchard when you got a tree from them, and when to spray and how to spray. And I think it's pretty straightforward, just a couple of fungicide and insecticide applications. I know that they're scary and we want to avoid them, but if we want to have fruit we can eat, sometimes those are useful tools. So it gives you an idea of like, if you wanted to do that, what you should start with. Yeah. So time. Does anyone have any? Okay. Well.
So anything juniper can get that? It's juniper.
Yes, I don't.
I know there's different types of rust, but
so there are different. Yeah, that's exactly my answer. Is different rusts have different host species. So there's cedar apple rust. I think there's a quince apple rust, and then there's a cedar quince rust, I think. And I'm gonna forget the other one, but they're pretty narrow in their host range. Yeah.
I just looked that up this spring because of what I saw. The trees, they're orange. I'm like, what is that? Like, little tentacles coming in. So then, of course, I went online, but I happened to plant two. They're some years old, and I think I'll solve them.
Yeah.
What I read is if you plant, they have cedar rust resistant cedars now. So you can get like the apples, you can get one that's resistant or immune or something.
Yeah.
So though you could replant, like you could actually maybe you could tell your neighbor, hey, you're in my apple.
Well, the problem is that
I'm glad you
in a rural area, you have no idea.
That's
like,
true.
People don't even know what they have in their forest.
So
right?
that's
so, yeah.
I just happened to, it's like right there. It's like here and here. It's a little down. And I think you're supposed to burn the whole tree. Spread. So I got to burn all the. I could get the resistant variety, but really.
Yeah. Yeah. For the people on Zoom, we're just saying that in addition to the apples being resistant, the cedar or juniper species, you could also buy a resistant species. And that's exactly right. Yeah. Other insects or diseases that people are really excited about or not excited about? As case
So
maybe.
pear trees. I bought 2 pear trees and colorbuds. And I planted a serviceberry right next to it. So I need to take that serviceberry out. It's little, it's tiny. I can.
They're all, yeah, go ahead. And I would say they're both malus species. So, so they're, yeah, actually serviceberry is very closely related to apples. So